picture's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with a review of something of his art, Walking to Lubeck with J.S. Bach by Horatio Clare. This is kind of like a travel book. It's a 91-page essay based on a 250-mile walk that Johann Sebastian Bach took in 1705 from the town of Arnstadt, Germany, where he was working as the choir master, to Lubeck. And there he went to, and I haven't checked the pronunciation,
Buxtehude. Buxtehude.
Buxtehude. He was on a kind of a pilgrimage to meet and hopefully work with Buxtehude, the most famous organist and composer of his day. Bach, at this time, was 20 years old. I really enjoyed this book. In the opening paragraph, or in the opening chapter, Horatio Clare, who's no slouch himself in the hotness department, talks about in Arnstadt there's a statue of Bach, as the young man he was when he lived and worked there, with a really pronounced bulge in his crotch. And over the years, I don't know how many years the statue's been there, but it's been rubbed so many times by so many people. I swear, I wasn't me, I haven't been there yet, but that's a different color. Here's the picture. Anyway, he sounded like a sexy young, very obviously gifted genius of a young man, and he was feeling understimulated and unchallenged in this small town. And so he made this pilgrimage, got to leave, and walked 250 miles. And this travel book is a recreation of that walk. Horatio Clare is a BBC journalist as well as a writer, and he reenacted the walk with BBC radio documentary crew. But the walk would have taken Bach a couple months, I think, several weeks. However, I don't know, how long does it take to walk 250 miles? Of course, Horatio Clare and his BBC radio crew, they did a week and retracing the steps. So there is the map. Arnstadt's at the bottom and Lubeck's at the top. And they walked, I guess, the most interesting parts of this, and it's Horatio Clare's ruminations on Bach, on Germany, on music, on the environment, on modernity, on history. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a bit of a dog's breakfast, but I mean that in the most benign way possible, because I really enjoyed it. But I didn't really care so much about some of the misadventures and banter between him and his BBC radio crew. I just thought it was a meandering travelogue type of read, which gave me a lot of joy, certainly a lot of enjoyment. I went down so many rabbit holes. But what I thought Horatio Clare did really well was give a portrait of Bach and his music and the Germanness, even the Arnstadtness and the Lubeckness of his music. I don't know much about classical music. I enjoy having it on in the background when I read. I listened to Bach and Buxtehude. I just looked it up, but I've probably already forgotten it. Buxtehude. And any music that was mentioned here, I immediately went to Apple Music, played it while reading, and that deepened my experience of this book. I don't need to say too much more about it. I'd rather just read. This is a brand new book. It was just published this month or last month. And let me read a couple passages to you just to give you a flavor of his writing. I think he's a really beautiful writer. We are well north, 15 to 20 days out of Arnstadt by the pacing of Bach's feet, and the roads and tracks are narrowing down towards Lunenburg. We are in or very near his footsteps again. The soil has altered, become sandy, and the trees have changed too. Amid these fine, tall beechwoods, Bach has become an adept and natural traveler,
loose and fit, the events and adventures of the road rich and numerous between him and Arnstadt, which now feels far away. Dogs, eccentrics, beggars, beer, dancing, and perhaps the company of one-night friends or lovers will have come together like a chrysalis, a collection of memories and experiences slightly out of time. He would never be so unwatched or unknown as he was on the road. With his only responsibility to himself, he could make or remake himself on his way as he wished. You develop a kind of itinerant persona on a long walk, part pilgrim, part passage migrant, at home in your own space, which you bring into every village and hamlet. You sometimes see an extreme form on pilgrim trails, where a rangy figure in the midst of long conversation with him or herself barely seems to see you. So intent is he or she upon the way, the road, the hostel. When it rained like this, a light freshening rather than a soaking, he must have pulled his cloak on, set his hat, and kept going, singing sometimes, or humming. It is easy to see him fueling up and setting off into his days, the liberation of a stride out of town in the mornings an equal counterpoint to the relief with which he tramped in at nightfall. In soft November weather, he walked through thick cushions of beech leaves, gold and bronze and red. There were jays then, too, the birds we see most often now. Jays are as exotic as rollers in their way, composites of all autumn's colors, catkin pink chests, leaf gold crowns, flashed with bright evening blue on their wings.
So one of the things that may or may not work for you, sometimes there was a couple times where I thought he was imagining he felt like he really was channeling Bach and telling us what he was thinking and feeling, and nonfiction writers do that, and if they do it too much, I don't like it, but it didn't bother me too much here. Let me finish with some writing about music. And if it works, I'm going to pipe this composition in the background while I read. If it works, if I can get an uncopyrighted version, because I listened to it as I was reading it, and it was a really wonderful experience. The piece that he's talking about is one of Bach's early chorale partitas. It's BMV 766-70. Christer du bist der Helltag. Christ, you are the light of day.
Bach sets out with us, much refreshed from his Lüneburg stay. No doubt he had seen George Baum and apprised him of his plans. If Elliot Gardner is right, and Bach had lodged with Baum before, then perhaps he did so again. Scholars have detected Baum's influence in a clutch of Bach's works, particularly in the early chorale partitas, BWVs 766-70, probably composed in Lüneburg under Baum's tutelage. The first, Christer du bist der Helltag, Christ, you are the light of day, is doubly apposite this morning. It has a delightfully exploratory quality, the organ striding forth, puffed up with the confidence of starting out, a stately chorale indeed, which then quietens and complicates, simple harmonies dividing into two-part variations as it strolls on. No great consequence or feeling attends the piece, but it is more than a technical exercise. It feels young, though not juvenile. There is a recognition of beauty's transience in its lighter passages, and the seventh variation stretches upwards and deepens, closing with a resonance and solemnity which feels slightly put on, but restrainedly, respectfully so. You can almost see him lifting his hands from the keys and looking up for Baum's reaction. If music does reveal some deep part of us which words do not, compare a writer's prose and poetry, how much more exposing is the more musical form, then the chorale partitas summon a dedicated, brave young writer, brave enough to allow himself to be vulnerable, his music working between something delicate and careful and something much more longing. He is tangibly still on the leash, but learning all the time.
All right, well, if any of that speaks to you, I think you might enjoy this little book. It's certainly a gorgeous physical creation, isn't it? I will read more by Horatio Clare. He's written a memoir about his Welsh family. I don't know if he's fully Welsh or half Welsh or what, but I want to check that out. And he's written all kinds of little books like this. As somebody who doesn't read about music and doesn't really care on a deep level about music the way I care about literature, I really enjoyed this. Thanks for watching.